Hey everybody, this is Professor McGloin checking in for our lecture content regarding storytelling in the workplace and professional narration and its role. Now, chances are when you saw storytelling on the schedule, you might have been thinking to yourself, what is that going to have to do with developing my professional communication skills? But one of the things that we know well is that we love a good story. In fact, just kind of take a look at likely the last few hours or few days of your life. You've likely probably consumed a wide variety of stories, whether it was on your social media feed, whether it was actually sitting down to watch a television show or a movie, maybe reading some articles, whatever it is, we are attracted to great story. It's the way that humans have connected for a long, long time. And what we want to do today is we want to kind of emphasize what makes storytelling effective in the professional setting, how we can be more effective storytellers, and then take a look at some activities that we can do to start using some really basic techniques to be more effective workplace storytellers. So let's dive right in. I've prepared some slides and content to help guide us through our conversation here. So as I've already mentioned, oral storytelling, oldest known form of sharing narratives. And it works and it's all around us. And chances are you have a preferred storytelling method or style. And for those of us who grew up with some older folks in our lives, the way that they told stories was almost predominantly probably face-to-face. We probably think about places that we tell stories, right? You know, the proverbial campfire, or from certain cultures and traditions, it could be coffee shops or pubs. Those are places that we think of as stories. But one of the things I want to put into your mindset today is that storytelling and its impact really should be thought of as being useful anywhere. And that includes the workplace. In fact, I think that the more that you can integrate story into the workplace, chances are it will help folks resonate with your character, with your value systems and structure. It'll make you more memorable, hopefully more likable. And in turn, usually some good things will follow through with that. So moving forward, I'd love for you to think a little bit critically, and that's what the light bulb is asking you to do down here in the bottom right-hand corner. But what are your expectations for a great story? Like, what does it do to you? Does it make you feel? Does it make you react, right? Of course, probably laugh or emote, maybe cry. Maybe it makes you feel guilty. Maybe it makes you feel nostalgic. And then what about a great storyteller? What are the characteristics of a great storyteller? What are some of the people in your life doing when you sit back and say, wow, that was a really good story? And then, of course, there's going to be the challenge of how you tell the same story via different channels. So we all have funny or unique or interesting things that have happened to us, and how we might tell them in an email versus face-to-face versus on social media is likely a whole lot different. So in the back of your mind, as we kind of build towards our professional communication skills, you should always be thinking about how things are going to change depending on the channel in which you'll be presenting that content. So over the years, right, as I have amalgamated some content on the topic of storytelling and have polled many audiences, this is typically the answers that we see, right? Folks want to have an engaging storyteller, somebody who they think is enigmatic, is charismatic, who brings a sense of enthusiasm and energy to the story. They want the story content itself to be compelling. And I think one of the things that can make us all a little bit more compelling is really kind of leaning into our genuine natures, being our true selves, being honest. Folks who work in the laugh business, right, in terms of being funny, they'll talk about that truth must be at the core of all things that are funny. And so if you're kind of working through your own development here today, and as you're watching this, you're saying, how can I be more compelling? Being more genuine, right? Being more honest, being more true to the story, to what took place, to how you felt in that moment is going to be a lot more compelling because it's real and it's honest. We like stories that are persuasive. We tend to enjoy things that move us in some way, maybe to act differently, to think differently, to behave differently. And so anytime your story can move towards an ending and getting us feeling different and changing in some way, that is considered to be a popular norm amongst desired storytelling outcomes. And then finally, we love stories that are relatively succinct, that are brief, that get to the point, that have great structure and cadence and rhythm. And we're going to have a technique today that'll hopefully allow you to utilize brevity, which will be a core theme for us, throughout the course of our content, right, we're being brief can also help us to be more effective. So let's take one giant step back and let's take a look at kind of the maybe modern or contemporary history of storytelling from the last maybe 30, 40, or 50 years. And what you have in front of us here is what's known as a logline model of storytelling. So if you were trying to take some unique, interesting thing that happened in your journey through life at this point, and you went out to Hollywood and you wanted to pitch a set of producers to pick it up, to make your show, to make your movie, to make your Broadway production, if you will, heading down to New York City, you would likely use some form of this logline model, right? Where you'd start in this relatively ordinary world where everything was normal, and then something would change. There would be some kind of cataclysmic event. And this event would essentially create some drama. It would be the focal point of the story, because after this event takes place, you, the main character, need to really figure out what's happened, right? What's going on, and how do I react to this, and what do I do? And so from there, of course, you go through the journey and you're trying to resolve the problem. In some ways, you're oftentimes trying to get back to your ordinary world. And of course, as we know from watching all the movies and reading all the books, the character never quite gets back to an ordinary world, because no matter what happens at the end, the world has changed and it's different. And your story should conclude in some way. And this is where that persuasive, compelling change comes in, where when the story ends, the world is now different. And you, the hero, the primary character, the protagonist in the story, has changed yourself in some way. Your perspectives of the world, or how you see things or people or places, has changed as a result of the journey that you took place. And so that is the most fundamental logline story model. And while you may not go through this process every time you go to tell a story in the workplace or to your colleagues, if you keep this in the back of your mind for your writing, even for your social media production, for anything that you're working on in terms of building content, there should be this flow where something happens, something dramatic takes place, and it is overcoming and working through the drama and the outcome associated with that journey that really ultimately should make the story interesting and work. And so here is a visual depiction for those of you who are visual learners to kind of see that we start here in an ordinary reality and something happens and we're trying to resolve this problem. And then at the end, as time has elaborated and moved on, we then have this new reflection, this new perspective, this new reality. So here you might insert your very basic statement, and the keyboard is there for you to take a minute to pause and to write this down. But if you were to think about your current career journey or your professional goals, right, in a world where this is your normal reality, right, you are likely doing something, whether it is consuming materials, taking courses, practicing a skill, you're doing something. And that is part of the journey in the hopes that something may take place as an outcome. So even just thinking in this manner should hopefully be able to give you some foundations of more effective stories. Here is a character some of you may know, or more importantly, an author that you might recognize. Mark Twain, also known as Samuel Clemens, writing many of his novels here in the state of Connecticut, was attributed to this quote, "Not that the story need be long, but it'll take a long while to make it short." I find this to be one of the most profound statements ever written on story or talking about writing content, because it is quite difficult to be brief, to be succinct, and to be narrow, and to be focused. It takes a lot more time and energy and thoughtfulness. And of course, Mark Twain probably would have known this best. So our journey on storytelling and how and why it's important in the workplace is actually going to revolve and focus around the concept of being brief and to working towards this goal of being succinct, and through our succinctness, deliver a more compelling story and engagement. So I introduce you now to the and, but, therefore method. And I want to encourage you to start integrating this and, but, therefore method into everything that you're doing. In fact, you can really utilize it on a sentence by sentence basis in your day-to-day face-to-face interactions. And it certainly is prevalent in your storytelling, whether it be written or recorded. And the idea here was put forth and really quite made popular most recently by Randy Olson, an author of a book, Houston, We Have a Narrative. And so you can go and you can check out Randy Olson's content. But what I want to focus on right now is he gave us this spectrum, which was known as the narrative spectrum. And he talks about essentially three types of stories. You have your and stories. And those stories are rather boring. right? They're not narrative, and they're just providing lots and lots of information, kind of like an encyclopedia. An encyclopedia is a lot like and. Here's all this information, right? There's no drama. There's no climax moment, right? On the other hand, on the right-hand side of the spectrum, as you see it, is what is known as the DHY, despite, however, yet. Oftentimes, this could be attributed to highly sophisticated story conversation, maybe experts in an area or a field who are making assumptions that everybody in their audience knows everything that they do. And they speak in these phrases where everything is this conclusive statement. But again, there's no drama. There's no but. And it's the but that lends itself quite well to what we think is an optimally interesting narrative approach. And here's some information, but that draws your audience in. It gets them thinking and reacting and going, what's going to take place next? And the therefore is the outcome. So see, we've taken everything from the logline model. We've boiled it down to these 3 words. And essentially now we can start to use this ABT method in just about everything that we do, because it actually functions as a story organizational tactic, but it's succinct and brief, which we know that our audiences want. So let's check this out a little bit further. Right, so and sets up the situation and provides pertinent information. And when I say pertinent, it sets the stage, okay? It describes what's going on. What is that ordinary reality? But is the drama. That's the climactic moment. That's the thing that's taken place, that's unraveled our unordinary world and has led us trying to kind of find a solution. And the therefore, of course, is that resolution. So what I want to build this all to is a question that you will often get throughout the course of your lives, particularly in your professional career journeys. And that is, well, tell me a little bit about yourself. It's going to take place in everything from interviews to all the way to the end of your career. When you're delivering those keynotes to hundreds of thousands of people, they're going to start by saying, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? And everywhere from today until the very end of time, we're found telling a little bit about ourselves to other people as a way of introducing ourselves. And yet, from the thousands of people that I've had the chance to work with, nobody really ever comes into those scenarios having something prepared. We know we're going to get asked the question, and yet chances are it probably changes how we answer it every time, which is good from an audience standpoint. But if we're not using the same storytelling method, then we're really missing out on an opportunity to maximize or to optimize how we introduce ourselves. So let's use the ABT method today to improve the way that we introduce ourselves. From a professional standpoint, if you come up with a cadence and a rhythm and a systematic way of introducing yourself across the board, you'll be more consistent. It'll be easier for you to start branding yourself earlier in your career. It'll be easier for you to start manifesting the brand that you're building. The way that we talk about ourselves has been shown to influence directly how we behave. So the way that you introduce yourself to a group is going to have a direct influence on how you're likely to behave within that group going forward. So here's an opportunity to very intentionally and very systematically determine, how am I going to introduce myself? And let's make it really easy using the ABT method. So I've set this up for you. And what I'd love to invite folks to do is, you can press pause right now if you want. You can pause this and you can begin to fill in and complete the blanks that are in the statements here. And by doing that, you'll have your own personal ABT introductory method before this video is over. It starts with, I have previous experience doing. So this is where you're going to begin to build your credibility. What is it that you've done? What do you want this group, this audience to know about you, right? What is it that you've studied? What is it that you have experience doing from a work standpoint? And let's share something about our passions, about what's in our heart. So what are our skills, right? And what are our passions? So you combine those two things, and that, of course, sets us up for the context, the foundation. But as a result of something happening, I found myself searching, longing, needing, wanting, seeking, practicing. This becomes very verb-oriented. What are you doing as a result of this event? And then, of course, now, today, therefore, literally in this moment, I am what? What is it that you're doing right now? And so I focus on great storytelling as being something that can take us way back in time. But right as the story finishes, the audience is just right there with you in that very exact moment that the story is being told. And I think great storytellers have an ability to do that. So if we were to work through this, right, we would be able to talk a little bit about ourselves in this way. So I'll give you my example right now. So I have previous experience working in higher education, designing courses, And I'm also really passionate about helping others to communicate more effectively. But as a result of being in higher education for a long time, I often found myself frustrated with not being able to help others outside of the academic structure. I found myself being very pinned in to only being able to provide service and solutions to my students. Therefore, I founded my own consulting firm that focuses on communication and helping others outside of the academic walls to also further their skills and ability. And it leaves me feeling more fulfilled. So what I've done there is I've given you a few different perspectives and ideas of who I am. And the thing that I love most about using this method, and I use it all the time, is that I'm going to invite different types of questions from different types of people. Somebody might hear that and say, what kind of courses are you designing? Somebody might hear that and say, what was it like starting your own company? Somebody may hear that and they may relate to the frustration that they have in their workplace, right? So they may have nothing to do with education or consulting or communication whatsoever, but they have a job and they're frustrated by their ability to connect with certain audiences. And so now they can relate to me in that manner. So you give 3 bits of information and you really open yourself up to now be more interesting to your group or audience because you haven't told them everything about yourself. You've just given them enough information to invite them to have a further conversation. Okay, real quickly, let's go ahead and wrap this up. Let's talk about some ways that we can tell stories more effectively. So if you are a bona fide storyteller, chances are you are aware of the 6 senses of story, if you will. What did you see? What did you hear? What did you smell? What did you taste? We love detail. We want it to be vivid. We want it to be brilliant. Bring your audience there. So in order to be more succinct and in order to be more brief, we have to use better adjectives. We have to use better terms and words, and that's going to be really important to us here. So what I want everybody to push themselves to do is to really take this time as they're working on their professional communication skills to expand their vocabulary and their vernacular, bring in great adjectives to describe the things that you experience, because it'll make your stories more vivid and it'll make it easier to remember your stories and you as a storyteller, which of course should have a compounding effect on how others see you from a professional sense. And then finally, what did you feel? Right? What was the actual sensations? What were you thinking? And what were you feeling inside? What were your relative emotions? So if you're struggling with your storytelling senses, go right to this place. Remind us of just what it was like when you're telling that story. You're going to have lots of opportunities every day of your life to tell great stories. And so now is the opportunity to start thinking about the senses that we associate with them. And then finally, my favorite, the 4 H's: heart, humility, honesty, and humor. You can see some redundancy there when we talked about storytelling being compelling. Again, we see a similar adjective here in honesty and being truthful, but also having heart, that enthusiasm that matters, humility, and humor. So those are my tips for how you can tell better stories. And that is the method of the ABT that you can use to introduce yourself anywhere you go for the rest of your life and make it a lot more efficient and hopefully effective for everybody else involved. So with that being said, get ready to tell better stories and start telling them as soon as you can, and start listening to the stories of those around you and start to pull the lessons that you learn from them.